Hello, welcome. This video is about my Camino story. It's a story of hope and understanding. It's a story of connecting or reconnecting and being in touch with what is here now. And I think that, at least in my case, that has been a very helpful thing. So if this story can be helpful to anyone else, then I think it's a good reason to be here recording it. So let me start with a little bit of background. When I was 17, so a long time ago, my mother became ill. Now, she became sufficiently ill to warrant not really playing the role of mother anymore from the moment that she was diagnosed and operated on until she passed away 18 years later. So my relationship with my mother was very strained, as you can imagine, because I was an extremely rebellious teenager and outspoken. I didn't feel that I could approach her or go to her in any way, because it was obvious that she's the one who needed support. So that's the background. Now, I've mentioned in both my previous videos that I'll be putting links to below, so please watch them, the logistics video and the group video. I've talked about intending to carry out this pilgrimage, the Camino del Norte, in such a way that I would be practicing mindful walking. Now, mindful walking is a Buddhist practice, and there are many other Buddhist practices, and one of them is called the BHAVANA. The BHAVANA is a traditional, classic meditation practice, and one of the stages is to wish all living beings happiness and well-being. May all living beings be well. May all living beings be happy and safe. So you might notice the word living beings. Now, the BHAVANA is for the living now. It's about being present and cultivating compassion and understanding in the present moment. But there is also in Buddhism this practice of dedicating the merits of any effort that you make in your sitting meditation or in any way to somebody who has passed on. So when I signed up for the Camino del Norte pilgrimage, I knew straight away two things. One was that I would be practicing mindful walking, and the other is that I would be dedicating the merits of my efforts to my mother. So, bearing that in mind, here is the Camino story. So we've arrived now at San Sebastian, which is in the northeast of Spain, and it's our starting point. And on that first evening, before we start walking, a guided tour of the downtown area of San Sebastian has been organized for us, a Pinchos tour, and the guide takes us in to the heart of the city, down a cobble street, a very narrow cobble street, and then we turn left and go to the end of that road. It's a very short road, and now we're at a new junction. The guide stops and turns. Now she has her back to the wall, and she's facing us, and she tells us that this is the main street of the downtown area, and that it's called this way because at some stage many years ago there was a big fire which almost destroyed the city. Now, I don't have to make a big effort to see that the name of the street is 31st of August. Now, let me just clarify that this story, it's not about seeing things or imagining things. Perhaps there is some interpretation there. I'm just telling you the facts as I lived them, as I experienced them. And this could well be just a series of coincidences. I'd much rather see it as a series of coincidences than something esoteric or unreal, because I'm going to stick to the facts. The fact is that the street is called the 31st of August. It just struck me that the name of this street that we were standing in front of, when I had already decided to dedicate the merits of my effort to my mother, that the name of the street should be the 31st of August, and that it should be named that way because of a big fire that destroyed the city and that it needed to be reconstructed after that. Because the 31st of August is the date in which my mum passed away. So right at that moment when I saw the name of the street and I was standing there and I remembered my intention, then it was as if my mother were communicating with me or recognizing, know that I'm with you. That was the message that I received. Know that I'm with you. Now, of course, I know that my mother is with me because 50% of my genes come from my mother. And in Buddhism, we are constantly reminded of our ancestry. And we know that our ancestors support us. So that was the first thing, this very clear message that I received, that I am with you. Next day, we're in Bilbao and we're going to the Guggenheim Museum, which is right there across the road from the hotel we're staying at. So off we go. We're inside the Guggenheim looking out, and then there's a glass door that allows you to go onto a kind of an outside patio area which is surrounded by water. And there are several sculptures around the area that I'm talking about, including the wall of the Guggenheim itself. It looks like scales, animal, reptile scales. So I'm there looking out at the panorama and I take this photo because the bridge is what draws my attention. So I'm happy with my photos and I go back inside. And one of the pilgrims says, "Did you see Maman?" And I go, "Sorry?" And she repeats, "Did you see Maman?" And I go, "I don't know, what's that?" And she says, "It's the massive giant spider out there. Did you not see it?" And I said, "No, I didn't see a giant massive spider. Where?" She goes, "Well, right there." So out I go again and, yep, there it is. There's Maman right there, right under the red bridge that had drawn my attention. And I had completely failed to see Maman. Now, it's not easy for me to make a connection between this giant sculpture of a spider and my mother. But the fact is that this giant sculpture is called Maman, and Maman means mother. And it was made, the artist was thinking about her mother when she created it. So the question that I asked myself then, looking at this sculpture of Maman, kind of asking the universe, gosh, what else am I not seeing in relation to you, Mother? What am I not seeing? And so that was the question. I posed it and then I released it. I wasn't really looking for an answer right there. So I enjoyed the rest of the evening, and then the rest of the walk was just mindful walking. And what do I intend to get out of this? Well, some clarity insofar as, just my situation in life, I suppose. One of the twins talking about how it's been for her that good things come to her. People come up to her and they ask her for her services, and so, she responds to that, and then that person is very happy and they talk about her to somebody else, and then, she gets another client, and how things just come together for her in a good way. And I guess that's true for everyone. I mean, things come together for me in a good way too, but they also come together well, let's call it a bad way, let's call it an unpleasant way. But I guess that what I'd like to do, or what I'd like to figure out, is how to be more skillful in handling all those aspects of my life that I consider unpleasant, knowing that it's part of being alive, right? Part of being alive is having a whole series of circumstances and aspects that we don't love, that we're not happy with, and not necessarily trying to change them, more like trying to be accepting, yes, of the way things are. We walked along the coast. We walked through many towns and villages. One day we walked to this church, which has been there since the year 900, I believe. And we also walked through forests, and sometimes it was good and sometimes it was not so good. Through forest and path and field and town and all kinds of landscapes. And what you do is you follow the yellow arrow. We're at the penultimate day, the day before we arrive, and it has been raining for 2 consecutive days prior to this day. But this day before our arrival is relatively dry. Not dry, but relatively dry. And by this stage, we've joined the French route. So along the first 10 days, we were walking the Camino del Norte, which is quite isolated. You know, it's just basically you and your group and long stretches of path. But now we're in the French route, and in the French route there are millions of pilgrims. A busy path, completely different from what we've experienced prior to this day. So here are the notes from that day, and it says, all good except discomfort, right foot, toe area. Suddenly realization of wetness, stickiness. Did I step on anything wet? No. Because it's quite uncomfortable and painful, and there was no way I'd be able to walk 18 kilometers more with this pain. So I knew that what I needed to do was to sit down. But we were in the middle of a forest, so there was nowhere to sit. And so I kept walking for about 1 kilometer or 2. And up ahead, suddenly there was an opening, and some benches and people hanging around in that area. And as I approached, I saw that there was a space in one of the benches. So I thought, okay, well, that's where I'm headed. And I start walking in that direction, and now I'm 10 or 15 meters away from the bench, and out of nowhere, someone just pops in and sits. And now there's nowhere to sit. So I'm thinking, oh, okay. So I turn back into the path and continue walking for another kilometer or two. So now by this time, because I haven't sorted it, now the discomfort is definitely there. So I'm walking, and up ahead I see a rock at about seat height and nice and flat at the top. And I thought, great, okay, so this is it. This is my opportunity. And I go towards the rock, and I'm just about to take off the backpack, and I look down, and on the rock, so back on it goes, and I continue. Meantime, people are going by, everybody's chatting. It's a very strange thing to be hearing human voices all around after all this time of silence, at least during the day. So I keep walking, another couple of kilometers, and now I'm on the side of a road, and I'm sitting on a piece of concrete. There's gravel in front of me, and up ahead is the road itself at a higher level. So there I am. I take my shoe off, take the sock off, and it's exactly what I thought. So the toenail is cutting into the toe, and it needs to be sorted, otherwise it'll continue cutting. I'm pondering. Meantime, pilgrims are going by, and all of a sudden I hear a voice in English. This is in Spain, and I don't know why anybody would address me in English, but this voice addresses me. She goes, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I look up, and I see this woman, and already I'm thinking, well, that's very nice of somebody to ask you, because everybody's just walking by. So for somebody to actually stop and ask, and in English, "Are you okay?" So I jokingly say, well, I could do with some nail scissors. And so she turns, goes back to where she came from, towards an area where the road and the gravel are closer together, pops down, walks towards me. So now she's standing on the gravel in front of me, takes off her backpack, which was completely empty. It was like air that she was carrying, opens the zipper, puts in her hand, and pops out some nail scissors. "Here you go." And I look at her, like from my seat, I'm looking up, and I go, "Oh, well, thanks." So I cut my toenail. Now it's fine. And she says, "Is there anything else you need?" And I go, "Well, if you had a plaster, that would be brilliant." I can't believe I had none of these things, but I didn't. I had nothing. And so she pulls out this little scroll that she unrolls, and it's a plaster. It's a piece of paper, but it's actually plaster. So she goes, "Well, cut yourself a little plaster from this." So I do. I cut it out. She puts the plaster, the sheet, and the scissors back in her backpack. And now I'm struggling to put it on my toe, and she bends down and helps me separate my toes and put this plaster on. So now, the cut toe is protected. And that was it. So she stands up, and I go, oh, the level of comfort now it's like I'm walking on clouds. It's like this woman has saved me from another 10 or 12 kilometers of great discomfort. And I say, "Well, thank you so much. That's so kind of you." And she goes, "No, nothing. It's nothing." And she starts walking away. And I go, sorry, but what's your name?" What do you think her name was? Her name was Josephine. She says, "It's Josephine." And I go, "Oh." Because my mother's name was Ana Josefa. And so I sit there for a few minutes, almost with tears in my eyes, thinking, wow, you really are here. You really are here, and you're here to support me. So that's my Camino story. This may well be just a series of coincidences, and I'm happy to accept it as that. But I also know that there is so much more than what we're able to see. My question to you is, do you have a Camino story? What happened to you in the Camino that made you really reflect upon how you go about your life and what kind of person you want to be? What kind of impact do you want to have in the world? I know from my story that I'm here for a reason, and that reason is to help. I don't know who, but I know that that's what I'm here to do. So if this video is in any way helpful to you, please let me know. Share your story and let's hook up. I hope to hear from you. Talk soon. Bye.